Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 6, Episode 20, The Fusilli Jerry. Hello everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. I am trying a new setup today. I know you guys love my setup talk. As some of you may know, I record in my closet and it's never comfortable. I don't really have like a table to sit, up to and comfortably have like a chair. So I'm usually on the floor, crisscross applesauce or contorted a little bit so I can get the best positioning. But nothing has really worked very well. So today I'm standing. I have a dresser in my closet. And so I said, well, I feel like I'm always a little bit kind of misaligned after recording my podcast. Certain body parts fall asleep. It's not good for this body of mine. So I said, well, let me just stand the whole time and we shall see. I'll report back. I mean, this is just always the most exciting banter. I know you guys love it. How about we just get into this episode? Spoiler alert, I love this episode, and so I'm excited to talk about it. The synopsis for the Fusilli Jerry is as follows. Kramer begins making statues of his friends out of pasta shells. In a fit of jealousy, Frank Costanza accidentally sits on a Fusilli Jerry. Jerry and George compare notes on a move Jerry has found successful in bed. Jerry learns Elaine's mechanic boyfriend, David Puddy, is using Jerry's sexual move without permission and makes him stop, much to Elaine's displeasure. Kramer mistakenly gets new license plates that read Ass Man. George is disturbed to hear his mother is getting an eye job. Once again, the least amount of effort put into the synopsis. I want to meet this person one day. Who wrote these? And this episode was written by Marjorie Gross. I wanted to take a few minutes and talk about Marjorie Gross. She was a writer, of course, on Seinfeld. She was a stand-up comedian back in the 70s. She hails from Canada. In addition to Seinfeld, a couple other shows she wrote for were Newhart and Square Pegs. Now, sadly, Marjorie Gross did die of ovarian cancer in 1996 while she was still working on Seinfeld. She was only 40 years old. Yeah, she worked until the end, pretty much. Jerry actually put a cot in her office so she could rest while working, while she was going through chemotherapy. And she wrote a pretty famous piece for The New Yorker in April of 1996, and she died actually in June of 1996. But it was a critically acclaimed piece. It was called Cancer Becomes Me, and in it she just writes about her experience having cancer. And it's very comedic, as you would imagine, considering she's a comedy writer. And I thought a couple things were kind of funny about it. She had said she really hopes she can hang on until November of 1996 because then she could possibly be reincarnated as Madonna's baby because Madonna was pregnant. So I thought that was kind of funny. And I just wanted to read the 5 good things about having cancer from that article that Marjorie Gross wrote. She said, number 1, you automatically get called courageous. Number 2, you are never called rude again. You can cancel appointments, leave boring dinners, and not become a social pariah. Number 3, everyone returns your calls immediately. Having cancer is like being Mike Ovitz. I had to look up who Mike Ovitz was, and he is the founder of Creative Artists Agency, one of the biggest agencies in Hollywood. Number 4, she said, people don't ask you to help them move. Reminded me of Seinfeld, of course. And finally, number 5, she said, if you're really shameless, you never have to wait in line for anything. So I just wanted to talk about Marjorie Gross a little bit, considering she died while writing for the show, super young, 40 years old. And this episode is so brilliantly written. And she's a female writer, kind of rare on this show. So I just wanted to take a few minutes and talk about her. All right, so we start the episode on the street. Elaine and Jerry are walking together, and he says, I can't believe you're going out with David Puddy. And she's like, why? Is that a problem? And Jerry thinks, well, he could have asked me. He's supposed to be a friend of mine. Well, it has been a few years, Jerry. Well, and he says, Elaine, you always care who an ex-girlfriend dates. You don't want it to be someone who you know, and you don't want it to be someone better than you. Now, obviously, the latter is impossible. Oh, God. But the former still applies, Jerry says. And then he adds, I just can't imagine you dating a mechanic. Heavy with the sarcasm, she's like, oh, right. Well, all those mechanics do all day is work with their hands and their big muscular arms on machines, and then they come home dripping with animal sexuality like Stanley Kowalski. What a huge turnoff that is. All right, Jerry says. My take on this scene, it's very much just setting up Elaine's situation with her boyfriend here. So we need to establish that Puddy is someone that Jerry knew before. It was his mechanic, which honestly, I forgot. I always forget that. It seems like Puddy comes on the scene because Elaine brings him to the circle. But no, apparently Jerry knew him because Puddy was his mechanic. I always forget that detail. Puddy, for me, makes a bigger impact in the face painter episode. And for some reason, he just doesn't come across as knowing Jerry. But I digress. In this scene, we have a rare reference to Jerry and Elaine as a couple. I don't mind it at all. I usually don't like any kind of reference to that time because it's such ancient history. But it's very quick, and it is necessary to have the whole move conflict work. And I do love Elaine's sarcasm about dating a manly man who works with his hands. It's just the right thing to say to Jerry, who, let's face it, he doesn't really ooze masculinity in that way. And so she knows to get under his skin. She's like, yeah, what a turnoff to date a man who's super burly and manly. Because, Jerry can't compete with that. All right, next we're in Monk's. George is having lunch with his mother, Estelle, and he points out that there's lobster on the menu. Who would order lobster here? So what, she says. Suddenly you're a shellfish connoisseur? George says, without TV, this relationship is just torture. Estelle tells George she's getting an eye job. Well, George is not happy about that, but she says, look, I'm a divorcee. No, you're not. You're just separated. You're a separate. Well, she says, I'm out there, George. George insists she is not out there because he is out there. And if he sees her out there, there is not enough voltage in this world to electroshock him back into coherence. I have to pause here because that may be my favorite line of this entire series. I am not kidding. The delivery of it is fantastic by Jason Alexander, but just that wording. If I see you out there, there is not enough voltage in this world to electroshock me back into coherence. I mean, it's so good. So good. Well, she tells him she needs a ride back from the operation, but George can't do it because of something Steinbrenner needs him to do. George sees Kramer and begs him, really, to sit down with them. Estelle tells him, so Kramer, I'm getting an eye job. Well, he agrees that she needs to look her best. She's out there. She's not out there. Kramer inquires and finds out that she's seeing Dr. Bakersall. Ooh, he's good. Apparently, he turned a noseless kid into Ricardo Montalban. All of you Fantasy Island fans will recognize that name. George gets the idea for Kramer to pick Estelle up from the operation since he has the car with the bench seat she likes, which just cracks me up. Bench seats. Wow. That's an old car. And Estelle's like, well, I don't care. But Kramer says, I can't drive anywhere until I get my new plates. Well, giddy up. So then next we are at the Motor Vehicle Bureau. Kramer is getting his plates and, they say ass man. He tries to tell the woman, these are not his plates. I'm not the ass man. And she says, well, as far as the state of New York is concerned, you are. Then we see a quick shot of Kramer's car with the ass man plate on it drive away after very loudly backfiring. The actress in this scene is Yvette Cruz, and she has also appeared in Ghostbusters 2, Grey's Anatomy, Judging Amy, amongst others. I think she's really funny in this scene. I love the way she delivers that line. As far as the state of New York is concerned, you are. I just love, it's like the perfect amount of attitude, and it's very realistic for those employees who work in those government buildings. I mean, I think we've been to the Secretary of State or the DMV, whatever it is in your state, and most of the time it's they're not the most pleasant people. All right, next we are at Elaine's apartment. Elaine and Puddy have just finished having all the sex, and he's breathing pretty hard. He asks her how she feels, and she says fine, but clearly something is on her mind. He asks her if something's wrong. No, she says, nothing. My take on this scene, it's a pretty quick scene. Puddy really steals the whole scene here with that breathing. Oh my God. I'll get more into just sort of the impact that Patrick Warburton had on the cast and crew of Seinfeld after this first performance a little bit later. But it's stuff like this that made him so memorable. Like, I'm sure the script just called for him like breathing hard because they just had sex. But my God, he just makes a meal out of it. Just with like, it's just so funny. It could have just been so simple, but yeah, Patrick Warburton took it that extra mile. Oh, and Elaine looks very sexy and adorable in this scene. I have to mention it. All right, next we're at Monk's. Elaine is waiting. Jerry arrives and she says she was with David Puddy last night. Yes, so? He did the move. What move? The move. My move, yes. Are you sure? There's no confusing that move with any other move. Oh, Jerry is so upset he stole my move. Well, Elaine's really mad. What else did you tell him? You two must have had quite a little chat. Oh, Jerry insists it wasn't like that. He didn't even mention Elaine's name. They were just, they were in the garage. It's very conducive to sex talk. It's a high testosterone area, he says. And she's like, oh, because of the pistons and the lube jobs. Jerry says he's going to go down there and tell Puddy to stop doing his move. Whoa, Elaine isn't sure she wants that to happen. Isn't that a little rash? No, he says he stole my move. Yeah, but I like the move. Besides, Elaine says it's not exactly the same. He uses the pinch at the end instead of the swirl. Oh, yeah, I've done that, Jerry says. That's not new. Besides, how can you trust him, Elaine? His whole repertoire could be lifted. Elaine says it's so strange considering he's such an honest mechanic. Jerry agrees, probably the only honest mechanic in New York. My take on this scene, I love this scene. Elaine's confrontation with Jerry is very justified, if a bit misguided. That moment where she swats him and says, you two must have had quite a little chat. And that, she just looks so hurt. And I love that choice that JLD makes. She's not just mad. I mean, she's definitely mad, but she's very, like I said, hurt, sort of embarrassed. And that's all said with JLD's face acting, which, look, I realize it's just acting. Everyone acts with their face. But I like to be specific. Expressions say it all. And JLD is just such a master at the subtleties of different expressions. I mean, it would have been believable for Elaine to just be really mad and make a mad face and confront Jerry with that. But the way she sort of her eyes make it look like, oh, I'm so embarrassed that you talked about me. And so I just love that choice. I also like that Jerry acknowledges the validity of her ire, I guess, and clarifies, look, I didn't even mention you. It was just the environment of that garage that made him talk about his move. And that seems to pacify Elaine. So I just really like the interaction between both of them. And y'all know I love a good emotion switch in a scene. So when Jerry says he's going to stop Puddy from doing the move, Elaine's reaction is so great. Isn't that a little rash? She's like, she loves the move. And now that she knows Jerry didn't mention her by name, she's all about it. And then, of course, her shaky voice, but I like the move. I mean, she's actually getting choked up at the thought of Jerry taking it away, which makes me think, holy crap, this is some move. All right, next we're on the street. Jerry's telling George how Puddy stole his move and is using it on Elaine. Well, George is only focused on the fact that Jerry is hoarding sex moves and he needs a bite of a candy bar to calm him down, which I believe was a Nutrageous bar. I was trying to look. And George needs to know his move. His girlfriend, Nancy Klopper, is just so bored during sex, he'd settle for a belch, for God's sake. And Jerry gets very dramatic about it. Before I tell you, yeah, it's in the vault. And he says, no, it's not even about that. Jerry goes into the importance of the move and, it's not something to be used willy-nilly. You got to tell me or not? Jerry starts in. Headboard unpadded is better. The height differential is important. And he says, if you can master this, he'll never be alone again. Then we go to Jerry's apartment. Jerry and George enter, and now Jerry's at the end of the move, explaining it, and says, you kind of have an option. He prefers a clockwise swirl, while Puddy likes the pretentious pinch. Kramer enters with a little thing he's made. It's a Fusilli Jerry. He did it in his spare time. He's working on one of George, too, with ravioli. He has to find the pasta that represents the person. And, he chose Fusilli because Jerry's silly. And George asks if he got his plates, and he says, oh, yeah, I got them. And by accident, I got someone's vanity plate, and it says Ass Man. Oh, who would order that, Jerry says. Well, it might be Wilt Chamberlain's. Jerry doesn't think it necessarily is someone who dates a lot of women. It could just be a guy with a big ass. Or a proctologist, maybe. George is like, get out of here. No doctor would put that on his car. Have you ever met a proctologist? Kramer insists they have great stories to tell, great senses of humor, because no one ever wants to admit that they stuck something up there. Kramer then hears his phone and exits. And this is just a great cap to the scene. Where would you like to stick this? I tell you where I'd like to stick it. All right, next we're at the garage, and Jerry confronts Puddy, about using his move on Elaine. And Puddy knew that move before he knew Jerry. You just told me about the end. And Jerry's like, the ending is the whole thing. Without the ending, it's nothing. You had nothing. Oh, that ending was so obvious. Could have figured it out. Didn't need you to tell me about that stupid twist, swirl, whatever. I don't even do it. I know you do the pinch. Yeah, that's right. We get our first Puddy. Yeah, that's right. And Jerry's not letting up. He calls him a hack. And Puddy's like, you know what? I got to get back to work. Fine, Jerry says, look, if you want to use it out of town, that's fine, but don't use it in the city. And Puddy tells him, why don't you do that with your car the next time it needs work? Fine. Good. And then we see a quick scene of Jerry hitting a pothole or something on his drive back, and his car starts making weird noises. All right, next we are in George's bed, and we see some movement under his sheets. Then we hear, ow, George! And Nancy Klopper emerges and asks him what he's doing. Pleasuring you? Well, stop it. You don't like the move? No. She says it feels like aliens poking at my body. And he says, okay, I'll go back to my usual routine. And she does not look too excited about that. The actress here is Marla Sucarezza, and she's appeared in Law & Order SVU, The Good Wife, Suits. I like her. She's so unpleasant, but it just cracks me up. I just love how not into George she is. Do you even like him? Also, fun fact, George tells Jerry that she's 5'4" when Jerry asks how tall she is, when in actuality, Marla Sucarezza is 5'10.5". So there's no wonder they don't have any scenes of them actually standing together. All right, next we're now in Elaine's bed. Elaine is having a good old time by the sounds of it. She and Puddy are under the covers. But then he emerges apologizing. I'm sorry, he says. Well, you can't do the move now because Jerry called him a hack. Elaine begs him, please, and he refuses. I'm just not into doing it anymore. So that's it? I'll come up with some new stuff. My take on this scene, once again, this is a Puddy-dominated scene with the comedy. It's all the things, the squinting, the voice. It all makes me laugh. And also, once again, needs to be mentioned, super sexy Elaine. All right, next, quick scene on the street. Kramer finds a note on his car from an ample-assed woman. All right, next couple scenes, we're at Bakersall's office, and then we're in Kramer's car. The doctor is telling Estelle that she can't cry for 10 days. She could ruin the operation. Oh, okay. And he asks if she has a ride. My son's friend should be here any minute. And then we see Kramer roll up and park in a doctor's only spot. A security guard comes up to check on him, and he points to the plate, Dr. Cosmo Kramer, proctologist. The security guard's like, oh, okay, doc. On the drive back, Kramer is telling Estelle how fantastic she looks. This takes 20 years off. And then we hear a bunch of people calling from outside as they're driving by, calling him the ass man. Hey, there's the ass man. Estelle has to clarify, did they say ass man? Boy, I never dreamed it could make such a difference. And then Kramer hits a pothole, maybe the same one Jerry did, and puts his arm across Estelle's chest. Ooh, she has quite the reaction to that. All right, next we're at Jerry's apartment. George is there, and Jerry's asking what he did wrong with the move. Did you close with the swirl? You're supposed to close with the swirl? Yes, Jerry says. There's a progression there. I told you to write it down. George agrees. He should have written it down. Jerry's like, please just don't do it anymore. You're going to give it a bad name. Jerry gets a phone call, and he's appalled at what he hears on the other end, a $2,800 estimate on his car. He tells him not to do anything, and he hangs up. George is like, well, why are you doubting Puddy? Well, except it's not Puddy. Why? Well, Jerry says we got into a whole thing about the move, and I took it to this other place, and I think they're trying to screw me. Well, of course they're trying to screw you. That's what they do. They can say anything. Nobody knows. Hey, you need a new Johnson rod in here. All right, put one of those on. I don't know. All right, it must be said, this Johnson rod line, this episode has some of the best lines in it. I love it so much. I don't think even 3 days goes by without either myself or my husband making reference to a Johnson rod. And it's just kind of like, we'll hear about something, or it's like recently we've needed a few things fixed around the house. And after the person, the estimate or whatever happens, like a person comes over and kind of gives us an evaluation and tells us what we need to do. We're like, we don't know. We don't know about HVAC systems. We don't know about plumbing. They could tell us we need a Johnson rod. We always make reference to it, and it's so fun. And another just brilliant line read by Jason Alexander. By the way, we need a new Johnson rod on here. It's just so funny to me. Elaine enters, and she's extremely irritated. Something I said, Jerry says. Yes, as a matter of fact. She says, David Puddy won't do the move anymore, and he's come up with some other move, and you should see this thing. Jerry asks, well, what is it? Oh, it's just a lot of fancy schmancy stuff. You know what it is? It's like a big budget movie with a story that goes nowhere. Elaine's like, this is no good. It's taking up a lot of my time. She says she's not going to stand by and allow it when a perfectly good move is sitting in the barn doing nothing. George asks, does his new move involve a knuckle anywhere? Yes, she says. I think that's mine. He stole my move. Elaine says, I'm not surprised. Jerry asks when she's seeing him next because he needs her to get an estimate on his car. And she's like, what? How am I supposed to do that? He gives her the work order with everything that's wrong with the car and, just bring it up at the right time. George is about to leave, and then Kramer approaches with Sally. He introduces her, and then she turns around to leave, and, she's got a big butt. George gives Jerry a look, and Jerry gives Elaine a look, and they all kind of make the same face. So Sally is played by Judith Shelton, and she was a regular on the Gregory Hines show soon after this appearance on Seinfeld. Now, obviously, they just wanted a woman with a big ass, and I think she has a fantastic ass, and I love the way she turns and struts away with it. Very nice. My take on this scene, this is such a great scene, top to bottom. Before Elaine arrives, that conversation between George and Jerry is brilliant. I love how confused George is. He's supposed to close with the swirl? I already talked about the Johnson rod line, but just needs to be said again. Another mwah, chef's kiss. Okay, then Elaine arrives, and that energy is just so funny. That irritation, the way she's sort of walking around. She can't even sit down. She's so annoyed. And that funny line comparing the new move to a big budget movie. Brilliant. So brilliant. Bravo, Marjorie Gross. And I think a lot of us ladies can relate to this. Probably some dudes out there as well. I don't want to be gender biased here, but sometimes people think they really need to overcomplicate stuff. Don't overcomplicate it. Here's some sex advice. This is what you come here for, obviously, but most of the time, simple is where it needs to stay. Okay, just because you saw it on some choice videos you might have watched, don't believe it. Everything is acting on those. So most of the time, that stuff is just for show, and it's not usually, in my experience, what needs to happen for any pleasure. So sex advice for the week. You're welcome. I, of course, love Elaine's little jab at George with the knuckle move. It's so perfect. I'm not surprised. Now, the setup for Elaine trying to find out an estimate for Jerry is just genius. And of course, just once again, being friends with these idiots puts Elaine in these insane situations. But she also does it. So that's what I love. While Elaine is so often, she's like the voice of reason. She's the smartest one in this group by far. But she does have a loyalty to these ding-dongs that cannot be broken. All right, next we're at the Costanza's house. Frank is there to get his mail. And Estelle accuses him of not being able to handle the fact that she's improving herself. He says he's doing the same. He worked out with a dumbbell. He feels vigorous. She says, get your mail and go. I've got things to do. And he says he does too. Don't upset me. I can't cry. Getting an eye job like some Manhattanite, eh? Well, she says it's already working. She tells him how Kramer made a pass at her. Frank's like, you're crazy. Nope. He stopped short and made a grab. What? Frank is not happy. That's my move. I'll kill him. Next, we're in Elaine's bed. Elaine and Puddy are in bed and they're kissing. And, this is when she decides it's the right time to get an estimate for Jerry's car. In the middle of kisses and caresses, she asks about blown shocks, about bad gaskets. Puddy's like, what is this? What is this all about? She says, nothing, just taking an interest in what you do. He asks what kind of car she's talking about. Oh, any kind of Swedish car. Well, he tells her all in that could run about $1,600. Goes in for a kiss. She pulls back and says, is that with the parts and labor? Yeah, he says. He goes in for another passionate kiss, and as the camera pans up, we hear her say, no, not the knuckle. My take on this scene, oh my gosh, this is a really, really great scene to watch. I've always been so impressed with the direction of this scene. I mean, I appreciate the choreography that has to go into this too. This is not an easy thing to pull off. And it's done so well. Just, the technical aspect of it, like where the camera is, the way they have to move. But then performance-wise, JLD, I mean, it's like she's sensually asking these questions. It's flirty. I mean, it's so well done. Like, this is her pillow talk. And Puddy is too dense to see what's going on. It's so great. I just love it. I just love this performance too, because she has to deliver these lines so like, oh, this is what we talk about in bed. So great. Oh gosh. And then ending on not the knuckle. Perfect. Hilarious. Next, we're in George's bed. George and Nancy look very satisfied, especially Nancy. She says, wow, that was great. She asks him, what was that? You mean at the end? A counterclockwise swirl. George kind of shrugs with his hands out, and she sees something written on his hand. She forces him, kind of violently, oh my God, crib notes? You have crib notes? He tells her it's a very complicated move. I couldn't remember it all. Well, she is disgusted and calls him sick, and she leaves the bed. It's not the SATs. I just want to pause real quick. I was trying to put myself in Nancy Klopper's shoes. Would I be this mad? I don't know. Like, in a weird way, I'd be like, he did some homework and he didn't. This was all to pleasure me. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I would be as upset. But like I said before, I don't even feel like Nancy really likes George. So I think anything's going to set her off. But yeah, I don't know if I would be this mad. I'm just like trying to imagine it. I just would have been like, I might have been like, oh, you have to write it down. But I'm also like, oh, well, thanks. You really wanted to satisfy me. All right, back to the show. Quick scene. We see Frank walking down the street. He sees Kramer's car and he recognizes it because the bro is in the back window. And then he sees the plate. Assman! I'll give him Assman! All right, next we are in Jerry's apartment. Elaine has told Jerry about the $1,600 estimate from Puddy. Oh, they are ripping me off. So he tells Elaine he's going to go back to Puddy. No move is worth this. So you don't care if he does the move? Jerry says, no. I mean, he can do any move I've ever done. A good mechanic is worth it, and you can't compare that to sex. Well, Elaine is so excited, does a little happy dance. Then Frank Costanza's at the door. Jerry asks what he's doing there. I'm looking for Kramer. He stopped short with my wife. What? Then he explains his move that Kramer stole. Stop short. Jerry's pretty impressed with that move. And Kramer enters and Frank just lays into him. They start arguing about the broman's ear, and it causes Frank to fall right onto the Fusilli Jerry. George has entered by that point, and he sees that his dad is impaled, and everyone is horrified. My take on this scene, all the comedy is dominated here with Jerry Stiller. I mean, he is unmatched. Every single line of dialogue in this scene, the way it's delivered by him, you can't get any better, which is why there are so many bloopers. If any of you out there have seen the bloopers of this scene, like Elaine cannot keep it together. Jerry cannot keep it together. It's worth watching. Look it up. Elaine's got a little bit in the beginning. I love her little happy dance because Puddy is allowed to do the move again. This is all she cares about. All right. Lastly, we are in the proctologist's office. Jerry, Elaine, and George are sitting in the waiting room. Jerry says, if I wasn't there, I wouldn't have believed it. He had to use corkscrew pasta. And they all kind of shift in their chairs uncomfortably. Kramer is looking at the pictures on the wall, and then he sees a sailboat with the name Assman on it. He tells Jerry he's the Assman. The doctor comes out and tells George that the procedure won't take long and that he's going to be fine. As he's walking to the back, Kramer stops and asks if he got the wrong license plates. Yes, he says, and he's still waiting for the Motor Vehicle Bureau to straighten it out. So, you're the Assman. And Dr. Cooperman winks and walks away. Then we hear Frank's voice. It's 1,000,000 to 1 shot, Doc. 1,000,000 to 1. There's a tag to the episode where Frank and George arrive at the Costanza's house. Estelle is so irate. She's been waiting for hours. But he explains how he got a Fusilli Jerry stuck in his ass and he had to go to the proctologist. Well, she starts getting emotional because of how worried she was. Ma, don't cry. I can't help it. Ma, your eyes. Oh. All right, I'm going to take a quick break and I will see you on the other side. Let me ask your tongue a question. Are you bored, tongue? When's the last time you tasted something unforgettable? Do you need something exciting in your little tongue life? Well, look no further than Pinch and Swirl Pie Shop. Hi, I'm Mulva Bakersall, founder and owner of your new favorite place to open your mouth. Located in Clam City, Virginia, Pinch and Swirl Pie Shop will satisfy all your pie cravings. Every pie is served warm and gooey. No dry pies at Pinch and Swirl, that's a guarantee. We have all the classic flavors for your tasting pleasure. But if you enjoy some oral adventure, our pastry chefs love to surprise your mouth with a pinch of this and a swirl of that in our mystery pie of the week. Depending on the week, it can be sweet or it can be salty. And one of the weeks you may not want to eat it at all. Pinch and Swirl loves to involve our loyal customers as well. Don't miss our fun events like Cream Pie Party Time, where you can bring in your own cream and we will let you fill our pies yourself. And if you find yourself in the middle of Clam City, you must enter our daily pie eating contest. Yes, we like to do it every single day, sometimes a few times a day. Visit our website, boxmunching.pie, for our full menu and schedule of events. For a limited time with your purchase, you will receive a Johnson rod for your vehicle, courtesy of Puddy Tools. Mr. Puddy is one of our most loyal customers and undefeated pie-eating champion. Pinch and Swirl Pie Shop. We want your mouth on our pies. And we're back. Wow, there were quite a few extras for this episode. There was an inside look, and I'm just going to go over what JLD said in the inside look. And one of the things she was amazed with was just the material of this episode on the show. I mean, she just was like, how did we get away with talking about this stuff? And she also talks about how Patrick Warburton hit it out of the park when he got to the set. She says, we were all blown away. And Jerry talks about, too, how they loved this idea of Elaine dating a mechanic because, here she is, this intelligent, modern woman, and this would be the perfect guy to kind of trip her up. JLD also talks about that last scene where Jerry Stiller gets the Fusilli Jerry stuck up his ass and how she couldn't even watch it. I mean, it was so, in the way he screams at the end. I mean, she's like, it was all, I couldn't take it. And even in the inside look, as she's talking about it, JLD does that fantastic laugh where she can barely even breathe. The one we see in all those bloopers and most bloopers with Jerry Stiller. Oh, it's so fantastic. And then the commentary for this episode was done by none other than JLD and Jason Alexander. And Jason Alexander talks about Marjorie Gross and how she passed away from ovarian cancer and, you know, how they all had to see her go through chemo while she was on the show. And she really fought very, very hard. But unfortunately, the cancer was pretty advanced when she was diagnosed. And so she died at the very young age of 40. Apparently, the original title of this episode was The Ass Man, but that didn't fly with the censors. Man. Jason Alexander, I've talked about this before in other episodes where he's done commentary, and it's usually he's doing commentary with JLD. Sometimes Michael Richards is with him as well, but he wasn't there for this episode. But he just kind of gets a little creepy, I feel. But again, I'm like, they're great friends, so I shouldn't judge that. But anyway, what I'm getting at, the scenes where JLD is in bed under the covers with Puddy, he's like, give us a thrill, Julia. What are you wearing under there? And she's just like, as much as possible, sweatpants, 4 pairs of underwear. She's like, yeah, there's nothing sexy about that. So that sort of led him into this story about when the cast took the cover photo for Rolling Stone and they were all in bed together. And they were like, hey, Julia, take off your bra because we don't want to see the straps. So she ended up being topless underneath the covers with the rest of the cast, with the 3 other guys. And he talks about how they were trying to tug the cover off of her because they knew she was topless. I'm like, ew. And she just kind of like, JLD herself is just kind of like laughing, like, but it's not like, it's kind of one of those laughs. I think she's kind of like, yeah, that was really annoying or really gross that you guys were doing that. But anyway, I just was like, nice story of sexual harassment, Jason Alexander. Good Lord. Jason Alexander also mentioned that he has been asked many times, so what was the move? What was this move you guys were talking about? And JLD's like, I have never been asked that. And he's like, oh, I get asked that all the time. Oh, the name Nancy Klopper was the name of a casting director who was friends with Larry David. So that's where they got the name for George's girlfriend. During the commentary, JLD laughs so hard when Kramer walks in with the Fusilli Jerry. She's like, what is this? This is the dumbest thing. This is so stupid. And they just keep going. I've said it before, but both of them are just in awe of what they got away with in this episode. Like, they're literally talking about cunnilingus. They're talking about people sticking shit up their ass. Like, it's just amazing. Oh, and then apparently they had a name for the face they all make after seeing Kramer's big-butted girlfriend, the kingfish face. During that part of the episode, Jason Alexander was like, there's the kingfish face. We love that one. And then at the very end, JLD, again, referencing how she was trying not to laugh in that last scene with Frank Costanza and Jerry Stiller's amazing performance. She's like, if you look at my left hand, it's just clenched in a fist because I'm digging my nails into my palm to keep from laughing. Didn't work very well, but that was one thing I was trying to do. Oh, and then one thing in the notes about nothing I wanted to mention. The actor who plays Dr. Bakersall is Apollo Dukakis, the brother of Olympia Dukakis, who is also mentioned in the series with Dolores or Mulva. And I also love Olympia Dukakis, so I just wanted to mention that. And now it's time to open Greg's Sack Lunch. Greg is our most dedicated contributor to this podcast, and every week he sends a sack lunch over full of his thoughts about the episode. So first I find his overall thoughts. He says, this episode has somewhat of a different dynamic for Elaine and Jerry, bringing back up that they are exes and how her new boyfriend, in this instance, David Puddy, is a friend of Jerry's, or at least an acquaintance who comes between them. I don't love this setup at all this late in the series. First off, I've never been a fan of the Puddy character as a love interest for Elaine. It gives her a lot to play off of, and Patrick Warburton is totally fine in the role, but of all the guys she could have been on and off with for so long, Tim Whatley would have been my choice. The he's a dumb boy toy and she just wants sex works from the perspective that it's usually men treating women as objects, i.e. Jerry with Tawny Katane / the bad actress. And this is somewhat pioneering, and I love that Elaine gets to have this, but I didn't love how long this relationship continues, which is practically till the end of the series. Well, that is a lot you just said there, Greg. Well, we're not on the same page. I love Puddy. I love Puddy. I think it's one of the best characters on the series. I totally see your point with the Tim Whatley on and off potential there for Elaine. But as Jerry said in the Inside Look, they really liked this dumbass tripping her up because, okay, let's get a little deep with character analysis here. The arc of Elaine's character is really, she becomes a worse person because she hangs out with these idiots, right? So I think the more she hangs out with Jerry, George, and Kramer, her judgment and her she loses that level-headedness or that what we see early on in Elaine. So the arc of her character is really just, they all sort of morph into each other in a very basic foundational way. So she becomes more shallow. She doesn't want to deal with a complicated, deep man, like I think about the line she says in a future episode where she finds out Puddy's religious and she's like, oh yes, he is dumb. He is lazy. So you prefer dumb and lazy to religious? Dumb and lazy, I understand. So I just think her sort of standards are so rotted by her friend circle here that, yeah, Puddy makes sense to me. I think Tim Whatley, even though Tim Whatley gets super creepy, but yeah, I mean, an established, successful dentist? No. It just doesn't have the same impact to me because we need someone to trip Elaine up. And so for that reason, I totally support Puddy. And you're right. He is there till the end of the series. He is in the final episode where she says, don't wait for me. All right. Yeah. So we're not on the same page on that front, Greg, but I respect your thoughts and understand where you're coming from. All right, next in Greg's stack are his favorite scenes and Elaine moments. He says, I do love the scene where Elaine brings up to Jerry in the diner that Puddy is using a move on Elaine that is somehow Jerry's patented sex move. The premise of this is ridiculous. No guys go into sexual training conversations with their pals, and I wouldn't think Jerry would tell Puddy this before even George. But JLD plays this well, and that's why I like this scene. She's mad at Jerry for giving Puddy inside intel, but yet she gets sad when Jerry wants to tell Puddy to stop. Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation. That whole confrontation between the two of them, or Elaine confronting Jerry about that. Like I said earlier, it's like I feel she's mad, she's embarrassed, she's sort of hurt. Like, hey, this was private between us. I love the way she plays that, and like you said, she plays it so well. I think that's why it works. And again, it wouldn't have been a bad choice to just be pissed at him, but that look on her face, if you guys want to watch it, after she swats him and she says the line, you two must have had quite a little chat, that look on her face afterwards, it's like, hey, it's like this sad little, almost like a little girl. It's very cute. Oh, and then to talk about, yeah, I don't know what men talk about in doing sex training. It definitely doesn't track with Jerry's character to do this. And yes, you're right. Certainly, why would he tell Puddy before George? But that gets called out, so I forgive that. And it's also explained to, we were in the garage. It's very conducive to sex talk. It's a high testosterone area. So I think Marjorie Gross does a really good job kind of earning all of these things that may not track with the characters. It's like, okay, yeah, Jerry would never really do this, but it was the garage. And then, of course, George would be mad, like, hey, you're hoarding sex moves? Come on, you need to give them to me first. Oh, and I didn't even mention that line about the Zippo. I mean, I'm rubbing two sticks together and you're walking around with the Zippo. Again, Marjorie Gross, such a brilliant writer. All right, next Greg says, George steals this episode for me. While not Elaine related, George has so many hilarious lines between begging Jerry for sex tips and dealing with Estelle. He has one-liner after one-liner that just cracks me up. I'm out here rubbing two sticks together while you're walking around with a Zippo is so funny to me. As someone who has attempted to write a few sitcom scripts, that is just brilliant. And whomever wrote that knew that Jason Alexander could deliver it with the perfect stressed tone. Well, it was Marjorie Gross, and you are absolutely right. There are so many one-liners in this script that just fly, and once again, Marjorie, I don't know how many times I've said her name now. None of you are going to forget. Marjorie Gross wrote the Fusilli Jerry. All right, the next thing in Greg's sack is his scene swap idea. Greg says, I think, and Shivani, you'd probably agree, that we almost always would trade something Kramer is doing for more Elaine, and specifically more Elaine interaction with George or the Costanzas. Kramer is given something that is usually so unrelated to what the other three are doing that it's somewhat disposable. Hilarious, but disposable. The Assman stuff is funny, the pasta sculptures are funny, but I can live without it, especially when he's dating a heavier lady as if that's the punchline. Why not have a scene where Elaine and Estelle are talking about the eye job she wants to have done? They know each other. Why not have Elaine show up at the diner when George and Estelle are there and get her input on the eye job woman to woman? She'd be encouraging and also bickering with George. Elaine, in this entire episode, is just bitching about how good or bad the fellatio, or whatever pinches and swirls are supposed to imply, is for her. They needed to give her something else. Okay. I'm going to get more into my thoughts about swaps and all that later. Interesting. So I do have some ideas about what Kramer should be involved with. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. I want to say that I think it's pretty perfect as it is. Like I said, I do have some ideas I'll talk about in a little bit, but I always want more Elaine, but I think that we could achieve more Elaine in a different way. I don't think she needs to be involved with the eye job, but I definitely think you're right that she's mostly just complaining about the move or not the move, whatever. But I think that works for me. Also, it's definitely cunnilingus. Come on. Pinch and swirl. I think that's what we're talking about. And I'll get more into that and how clueless I was back in 1995 about what this was about. Lots to look forward to. All right. And lastly are Greg's extra thoughts. He says, I love when we get to see Estelle Costanza without Frank. Her interacting with George one-on-one is so well written. Up to this point, we kind of only saw when she was in the hospital after catching him with her Glamour magazine. When she's with Frank, that is gold, comedic perfection. The yelling, the bickering, it's magical. But with George and even Kramer here in the car scene, she comes in so gently. She's so sweet always, and I like that we get to see her in some scenes where she isn't at shriek level. I like that, shriek level. Estelle Harris is so fantastic in this role and in the way she interacts with Jason Alexander. I don't know how she and Jerry Stiller are not his real parents. I've said it so many times, but the casting of these two as his parents is better than any casting of guest stars I can remember on a sitcom ever in TV history. Oh, totally agree with that. Yeah, that little lunch with George and Estelle. And how quickly it goes off the rails. He's just trying to make some conversation. Oh, they've got lobster on the menu. And she just has to be like, so what? And he's just like, man, we need a TV. It's just, it's so relatable. It's so relatable. Greg's last thought. You can totally see Elaine start to laugh in the moments where Frank comes in yelling about Kramer stopping short. There are clear cuts where she's about to start laughing at him. Understandable. He's hilarious. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I've talked about this already. There's so many bloopers of that scene. And she talks about it, and she even gets a laughing fit talking about it in the inside look of the episode. So I can't even imagine having to act with Jerry Stiller and look him in the eye when he's doing this stuff and when he's yelling and the screaming. It's so what a gift to be able to work with someone that funny. Thank you so much, Greg, for your thoughts. And now it's time to close Greg's sack lunch. All right, moving on to my favorite Elaine moments. It's that scene with Jerry in the coffee shop, her confrontation with Jerry. I love the whole scene. My favorite part of that scene is, but I like the move. That's my favorite part of that scene. The close second is her delivery of the big budget movie with the story that goes nowhere. And I even have a third. It would be the scene where she is pillow talking all of the estimate information with Puddy. And my final notes of the episode, easily one of the best episodes of the series, in my opinion. So well written by Marjorie Gross. I love how raunchy it is between talking about cunnilingus and butt stuff. How fun. And they got away with it on a network sitcom. There's really substantial comedy here for JLD in this episode. Mostly with Puddy, though. She's definitely playing the straight character. But the storyline gives her such a great range of emotions. And we get to see Elaine, this woman who is so open about her sexuality. She does not apologize for being attracted to someone, as Jerry alludes to, maybe below her station because he's a mechanic. She's totally fine with wanting a manly guy who's good with his hands and other things. But I love that. I love that we're seeing, again, the sexual independence of Elaine, and it's unapologetic. And that's something we love about the character. And back to something Greg said, even though he's not a big fan of Puddy being the on and again, off again boyfriend for her, it is something different to see in a show where the principal female character is sort of using a guy, because we see that all the time with Jerry and George and Kramer. So it's like, again, it's all equal here. Elaine is just one of them. She's no better. She's no worse. Well, I think she's better. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like she's going to get any special treatment when it comes to her standards. I truly believe she gets corrupted by this friend circle she's in. I think the whole move plot is so well weaved into all the characters. Now, I do actually wish Kramer was a bit more involved with the Puddy, Jerry, Elaine stuff. Like, I feel he should have gotten involved in that conversation somewhere. Maybe he was in Monk's with them, or maybe back in Jerry's apartment talking about the move. I feel like he would have taken credit for the move. He'd be like, I taught you that move, Jerry. You stole it from me, or something. Because Kramer is always very, very confident about how he can charm the ladies, how he can please ladies. So I think something could have been included where Kramer's in that storyline as well. I love how we learn about Frank's old move and that it's Kramer who accidentally uses it. This is just a brilliantly written episode. I mean, there's so much going on, but it's all handled and balanced so well. And just to echo what Jason Alexander and JLD say in the commentary, it is pretty amazing what they got away with. Because also, I remember my dad not liking this episode at all. He was appalled. He was very disgusted that they were, alluding to what they were alluding to in this episode. And he said this was not appropriate. I still remember him where he was sitting on the couch in our living room, and kind of the look on his face going, that wasn't appropriate to have, on a show like this. And at the age of 16, watching this, I was totally clueless. I was very innocent. I was very inexperienced at that age. I didn't know what the hell they were talking about. Honestly, like I knew it was something sexual, but specifics, forget about it. I had no idea. I believe I had to have someone explain it to me in college, when I'm sure it was like on a rerun in syndication or something. And I felt like an idiot, but that was my reality. I just did not have any kind of experience with that when this originally aired. Overall, I just really love this episode, and I'm so excited that we are entering the Puddy era of Seinfeld. And I think that's all I can say about the Fusilli Jerry, or Fusilli Jerry. I don't know how to say it. I'm sure it's Fusilli. Please be sure to follow Hot and Heavy on social media. On Instagram, it's at Hot Heavy Elaine. On TikTok, at Elaine Bennis Podcast. And if you'd like to email me any thoughts, please do at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.